Since
you're
not
not
takers, I'll start.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Karuna Purna Shakti Mataji. Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada's remedies. When I joined the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, in 1972, an older god sister gave me a copy of Natural Remedies that Srila Prabhupada had shared with his disciples during the movement's earlier days. I have included the ones that may be relevant to hospice care, depending on the patient's symptoms and disease. Consult the patient's physician or hospice nurse before administering any of these treatments, as some ingredients may be contradicted.
Yeah, go ahead.
Contraindicated.
Yeah.
For example, ingestion of chili peppers or black pepper might be contraindicated in certain stomach or intestinal disorders.
Do you want to go on, or?
Yeah, I was wondering, do you want us to read all the recipes?
Maybe just read that the recipe is there. We don't have to read the exact recipe.
So the common cold.
Yeah.
There's Shilapad's cold remedy number 1, number 2, number 3.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 cold remedies. Chest and cold congestion. So there's a chest cold remedy number 1, chest cold remedy number 2, and Srila Prabhupada's chest cold remedy number 3. And then for constipation, there's a recipe, and another one for diarrhea, and one for headache. So there's one for sore muscles. Basically, it's massage with mustard seed oil and camphor. There's one for sore throats, which makes use of ginger. There's one for stomach ache caused by indigestion, which includes anise seeds and cumin. There's one for swollen glands, and one for toothache. This chapter provides a brief explanation of some alternative and complementary therapies. The reader is encouraged to explore this subject matter in more depth if further detail is warranted. Although previously stated, due to its gravity, one point deserves mentioning again. Because the patient's well-being is of prime importance, always consult with the primary physician and or hospice nurse before beginning any additional therapies not already a part of this medical regime. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
I thank you so much.
I know we had another volunteer.
Chiravali?
I can unmute for a second. Sorry, I apologize for that. Sure, Aradhana, would you like to take over? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Caregiver, care of the caregiver. You may not be able to do much to help your patients, a college professor once told me, but never leave them worse than you found them. Although his advice seemed somewhat flippant at the time, his words often haunted me at the end of a trying shift at the inpatient hospice unit. Had I relieved my patient's physical pain as well as I could have, had I really stopped to listen to my patient's concerns and fears. When I began home hospice care as a nurse, I found that visits were usually brief. Yet it was not uncommon to stay unexpectedly at a patient's home for hours at a time. Often, family members required more emotional support than the patient. Some were angry at their sudden increase in responsibilities, and as a visiting nurse, I sometimes took the brunt of their anger. Many times it appeared that a family structure was so fragile it could fall apart at any moment, leaving the patient without any assistance. For those patients who were emotionally isolated from family, friends, and neighbors, as their nurse, I became their only source of emotional support. A quick visit sometimes turned into an entire afternoon. In addition, ministerial duties became part of my unwritten job description. One husband, a devout Catholic and the only caregiver for his terminally ill wife, confessed his guilt at having silently prayed for his wife's death to come swiftly, not only for her sake, but also because he was so tired. I had to reassure him that he was not the only caregiver to have ever felt this way. Still, the guilt tore him apart. His remorse at having prayed like this continued to torment him, and after his wife's death, he was inconsolable. I often drove away from my patients' homes, taking these stressors with me. Then I found myself on the opposite end of the fence. Unexpectedly, I became the primary caregiver for my own family member when my mother-in-law was diagnosed with inoperable cancer. My husband's 8 brothers and sisters were counting on me to keep their mother out of pain. My mother-in-law would not allow the visiting hospice nurse to make a medical decision without first consulting me. Unlike the stressors I experienced as a hospice nurse, I now understood firsthand the physical and emotional exhaustion associated with caring for a loved one. I truly understood the turmoil and distress experienced by the families I had once tried to console. Does anybody else want to read? I'm happy to continue. I just wanted to see if anyone else wanted to.
Sure, I think you can continue. And then if anyone would like to read, please put up your hand. Thank you.
Okay. Towards the end of my mother-in-law's life, I sat at her bedside for hours as she became more and more unresponsive to the world around her. I watched for the slightest sign of distress. A sudden increase in respirations or a soft moan were seen as communication of pain and were responded to quickly. I placed her rosary beads in her hand because I knew it would bring her spiritual comfort. I asked the priest from her church to visit and pray with her and for her. I sang soft bhajans to her as she lay still in her bed. But as she grew physically weaker, so did I. I was tired and emotionally exhausted. I remembered the elderly man who confessed his guilt at having prayed for his wife's death to come swiftly, not only for her sake, but also for his. I finally understood. Having experienced both caregiver roles, one as a nurse and the other as a family member, I am aware of the stressors that can contribute to caregiver burnout. The ordeal of the caregiver can be compared to a fire that starts out burning strong and bright, but diminishes in size and strength if not given proper care. A caregiver's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual stamina can become tested in so many ways that over time, his or her brilliance and strength can be reduced to what seems like nothing more than ashes. Much research has been done on internal and external stressors experienced by hospice professionals and others in the caring profession. In an article written by Dale G. Larson, PhD, from the University of Santa Clara in California, Helper Secrets were granted from 200 hospice workers and analyzed to better understand the stressors involved in working with those whose death was imminent. I have included a few helper secrets revealed by hospice professionals because some of these thoughts emanating from sheer mental and physical exhaustion are universal, meaning that they can be experienced not only by those working in the hospice field, but also by those caregivers who put their personal lives on hold, so to speak, while caring for a dying loved one. Some helper secrets revealed were as follows. I may be too selfish to do this work. Sometimes I ignore the needs of my patient because I know I can't fulfill them completely. I think of humorous, sarcastic answers to my patients' painful questions or comments. I have distanced myself deliberately from my patient and his family as a form of self-protection when I have felt emotionally overloaded, even though I felt they needed emotional support. Sometimes I pray that God takes this patient because he is suffering so much. I hope he dies soon. I feel guilty. Caregivers are natural helpers. We are more than willing to assist others and feel good about helping those around us. But to assist one who is dying is a tremendous undertaking. Problems often arise when the expectations we place upon ourselves become unrealistic and humanly impossible. What we expect of ourselves and what we wish for our patients may simply be unattainable. There is often a wide gap between how we envision ourselves as caregivers and the grueling tasks we must attend to every day. We can comfort others just so much. We can sit at someone's bedside for just so long. We can deprive ourselves of rest for just so many hours. At some point, hopefully sooner than later, we must realize that without giving ourselves quote unquote care, we will be of no use to the people we are trying to help. According to Larson, when a caregiver's self-expectations are not met, it often results in guilt, anxiety, resentment, and anger. The result is burnout, which is experienced by the caregiver when he or she is unable to successfully adapt to and cope with perceived stressors. Stressors can be exogenous, external, or endogenous, internal. An example of an exogenous stress in a caregiver situation might include loud traffic noise that is keeping your patient awake at night. An example of an endogenous stressor is
It's endogenous.
endogenous. Thank you. Endogenous stressor in a caregiver situation might include you, the caregiver, envisioning yourself as anticipating your patient's every need before he has to ask for it. Obviously, this would be impossible, but if you expected this of yourself, it might become an endogenous stressor. Whether originating internally or externally, an anxiety reaction to these stressors depends on the caregiver's perception of these experiences. Over time, the extent to which stress is perceived or experienced may affect one physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. On the subject of burnout prevention, Porter Story, MD, a hospice physician, has identified warning signs of caregiver burnout. Reaction to stress will vary within each individual, but some common warning signs to look for are as follows: weight loss or gain, frequent headaches, gastrointestinal disturbances, muscle tightness or strain, inability to sleep, anger, irritability, frustration, depression, guilt, feelings of overwhelming responsibility, feelings of helplessness and an inability to cope, feelings of inadequacy or insecurity.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, please take over. Thank you. Nice to see you here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hi, Greg. Hare Krishna. How are you,
Hare,
Prabhu?
yes, very well. Thank you so much. Sorry I've been absent, but good to see everybody. Good to be back.
Good to have you.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me okay. Avoiding caregiver burnout. Although it is difficult, it is essential to identify early warning signs of caregiver stress and to intervene before it becomes burnout. Just as one's reaction to stresses will vary, ways of managing our stress will vary as well. Some recommendations include: maintain regular, healthy meals. Arrange for caregiver relief so adequate sleep is maintained. If you are not able to arrange for a regular nighttime coverage, it is recommended that a regulated sleep pattern be maintained as much as possible. This will often present a challenge. If you are only able to arrange caregiver relief during the day, then try to rest at the same time every day. Take a break. This may include asking another caregiver to replace you, even for a few minutes, or take a short break while your patient is asleep. Find a few moments to be alone each day. Chant japa while taking a break or while sitting at your patient's bedside. Surely maintaining your sadhana that was upheld prior to your caregiver responsibilities will be difficult. However, tremendous spiritual stamina will be gained by continuing to chant your prescribed number of rounds of japa. Whenever possible, find a few minutes to sing bhajans or read a verse and purport from Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books. Spend a few quiet moments praying to the Lord. Remind yourself that Lord Krishna is a source of all strength, both physically and spiritually. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord states, I am the strength of the strong, Bhagavad Gita 10:36. Write this quotation on a large piece of paper and mount it where you can see it often during the day. Forgive yourself for committing mistakes. The terminally ill do not expect us to be infallible. They only ask what we do not abandon them. Reveal your mind in confidence to someone you trust. This is one of the 6 loving exchanges between Vaishnavas. It is not a sign of weakness to ask for help, but a sign of great strength. Define realistic expectations of yourself. If it is helpful, keep a personal journal of your thoughts and realizations while caring for your patient. This is also a way to preserve the memory of the dying Vaishnav you are caring for and may comfort you after her death. In caring for a loved one, we become forced, often painfully, to find meaning in most difficult situation. Keeping a journal may help with your search. As a caregiver, it is essential to find what it is that gives you the inner strength to hold up another person. As a useful metaphor, imagine that you, the caregiver, are hanging on the edge of a cliff with one hand and trying to lift up your patient with the other. Certainly you would never think of letting go of the cliff, or you would both fall. Finding a way to hold on to your source of strength while lifting up your patient is the key to avoiding caregiver burnout. Signs and symptoms of approaching death. When a man is dying, the walls of his room enclose a chapel, and it is right to enter it in a hushed reverence. Sherwin B. Newland in How We Die.
I highly recommend this book to everyone. It's a little paperback book, How We Die. This Dr. Newland wrote it, and it actually goes through the process of dying and what happens physically, emotionally, mentally, and very worth reading. Extremely helpful to understanding the process of dying. Wonderful little book you can get on Amazon. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mataji. The difference between a sign and a symptom is that one is usually thought to be objective and the other subjective. In general, a sign is objective evidence of a disease or disorder that can be seen, heard, felt, or measured. A symptom is generally thought to be subjective and includes information from the patient, such as the onset of pain, precipitating causes, location, severity, and relieving factors. Just as there are signs and symptoms of a disease, there are many signs and symptoms of approaching death in a terminally ill patient. Although the dying process is as unique as the individual experience it, I have seen many of these signs manifest in a similar way despite the original cause of illness. The timeline for these signs and symptoms is a flexible one, with changes generally beginning anywhere from 1 to 3 months before death occurs. Two separate but interdependent processes will often take place. One is on a physical level, in which the body's systems slowly shut down, and the other is on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level, in which the patient distances herself from the world around her. Usually within a month or two before death, many patients shift from intellectualizing about their terminal condition to a true comprehension and acceptance of their mortality. Decreased socialization often occurs at this time, so patients may become more quiet and withdrawn. The patient may be trying to detach himself from his surroundings and those around him in order to let go. This progression of behavior is not exclusive to Vaishnavas and seems to occur in many patients, no matter what spiritual or religious affiliation they adhere to. Your patient may indicate a desire to be